I feel the same way. And every once in a while I hear myself go, well, back in the day, and I went, I'm never going to say those words again, right? But we turned
I know
50, and 50 meant
we did.
something different when we were growing up than I think it does now. Don't you agree?
Yeah, it's funny. It's like 25 years as a everyday grinded out journalist, and left the Boston Herald in 2013 to start my book writing career, and then I turned 50 during a pandemic, no less. So I was
Yes.
like, this is kind of weird, but as you pointed out in your intro, I love to work. I love what I do, and I'm a kind of I subscribe to that old saying that if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life, and I kind of live that every day.
I couldn't agree more. I get excited when I meet people that are 50 and really going. I feel like pivot's overused, next chapter's overused, but really you're starting on a whole new career. And I feel like when we talk about kind of the prime of our lives, it's very different than it was even 10 years ago for people that are turning 50, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And for me, it's about growth really more than like a number or an age. It's I've worked really hard to get to the
Hmm.
position where I am. I put, as you did going to Afghanistan and the stuff you did, I put my life on the line for my job, when I was a journalist many times. And I
Right.
also worked really hard to build a good name for myself and credibility and relationships. And those are all now paying off, in my career, as an author now. I'm constantly going back to the old contacts and what do you know anyone in this world, that world, this,
Hmm.
and I'm always looking for new ways to grow and learn, and at the same time meeting the next generation of journalists, and we're doing a lot of that with the podcast, and meeting young authors, aspiring writers, things like that. I speak at colleges all the time, so I actually love the place I'm at in my life. I feel like I have the best of both worlds, where I'm kind of advancing in my personal growth and also in my career, but I'm also learning so much from the next generation coming up. So I'm having a lot of fun.
I agree with you. I feel like that intergenerational thing that we're seeing right now helps me with my growth too. And I don't shy away from it. And I don't feel like, oh, I don't want to do that or learn that. I want to absorb what they have because I think they have a lot of bold behaviors, right? That maybe I didn't always have. And then I feel like there's something that I can teach them. Well, let's talk about you because you really did, you've been a journalist your whole life. So that is in you. But when you said, okay, I'm going to turn around and take those skills and then make them work for me, for myself, and sit down and write. How was that? What was that transition like for you?
Well, necessity is the mother of invention, they say, right? So, I became a journalist out of necessity because I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to write books and movies and all that. But, coming out of college with an English degree, they don't just, you don't walk into a movie studio or a lit agent and get a gig, So I had to figure out, how do I become a professional writer and make a living, support myself. So I became a journalist and I started writing every day. And I will say that anyone that wants to be a writer, you have to write. You have to learn how to write, and that's what I mostly learned at all the newspapers I worked at over the years. 14 years at the Boston Herald. Learn to work on deadline, learn to be organized, be fast, change quickly, adapt to whatever the material was. And so when 2013 came around and the bombs went off at the finish line in Boston at the Boston Marathon, I was the lead reporter on that story. And I had a couple of opportunities before that to do a couple of books about some cases that I worked on, and I actually edited a book for a colleague about a big murder case in Boston. But I didn't really find anything that really grabbed me by the soul and said, like, you need to write this book, that I would leave journalism or take some time off, whatever. But when the bombs went off, that
Sure.
changed. I'd been at 9/11, and then now terrorism is literally in my neighborhood, and I
Hmm.
felt like I kind of had an obligation to tell that story. I knew a lot of people were going to do books about it, but I had a unique position where I knew a lot of the players involved, and I witnessed a lot of it. And so I said, you know what, it's time for me to write my book. So I partnered with my co-author Casey Sherman, great investigative producer here in Boston, and we wrote Boston Strong. And putting paper to pen or pen to paper, whatever, or, sitting at the keyboard that first time with like the blinking cursor and nothing really in my head about how am I going to tell the story. Yeah, it was definitely daunting, but you just kind of think and you break through and you think about how would I want to hear this story? What do I want to hear,
Right.
read, and watch? That's how I write.
I love it, and it is exactly what we want. And as we see things turned into films, and that's got to be exciting for you to see your words, in so many different mediums. It's got to be incredible to you now.
It is, and it was very surreal. All of a sudden, I went from being a crime reporter day after day after day, getting
Yeah.
in early and staying there late at night, and then all of a sudden I'm on a set with Mark Wahlberg and Pete Berg and John Goodman and Kevin Bacon and Michelle Monaghan. It was just absolutely incredible. But I tell a lot of people this, and this is the truth. It sounds corny, but like I honestly wish I'd never had to write that book. I wish that I had written Star Wars, or Fantastic Beasts, something that just came out of my mind. But that everyone has their role in life, and I do believe that I had a role to play during that whole thing, to tell people what happened. And it's a historical record. And with the movie, um, it was a very interesting experience. I learned a lot there too. I see the way that there is a big difference between book and film, and why some things work in film and they don't work in a book, and vice versa. Um, I'm very proud of the movie and our involvement in it. I think they did a great job. The biggest thing for us was we became friendly with a lot of the survivors, and we actually went to the premiere with a group of them. And afterwards, I was like, biting my nails. I was like, oh my God, are they going to punch me? Like, what's going to happen here? And then, but they were all like, they were teary eyed, but they were like, that was really well done. They were very happy with it. They thought it was sensitively done, and they didn't have any problems with it. So that was enough for me. Anything else is gravy.
And you know what the truth is? After all those stars that you met, those survivors are the real stars. I mean, as a journalist myself, I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that day, that week, that story, where I was when I heard it, and it's just, and you remember it every time. What do you have going on also with
Yeah.
regard to
Yeah.
podcasts, crime podcast? I was a reporter for a long time and covered, I covered the beat, like I covered crime stories. I was the lead story, at night. It was whatever the crime was of the day. But to see true crime become such a big thing now, and it's a podcast and it's its own
Mm.
genre, yeah, it's just incredible to me. I step back and look at it, and it's amazing.
It is, and you raise a good point about the survivors there, and Casey and I take great pride. We've written 5 books together now. They're not all true crime. We did a book about Tom Brady and Deflategate, which was an investigative look at the whole Deflategate federal case and that whole disaster. And we also did a book about Pete Frates, the young man who created the Ice Bucket Challenge. So we try to just tell personal stories of triumph and people overcoming obstacles, whether it's Tom Brady fighting the NFL or Pete Frates fighting ALS or the FBI fighting to catch Whitey Bulger, whatever it might be. We try to find the soul of these stories, and we believe that all people like a good redemption story. So when you listen to our podcast, it's called Saints, Sinners, and Serial Killers, and we do episodes on all of our books, but we also delve into some of the cases that we covered as journalists that people may or may not know. Season 2, we're going to have a lot of really exciting new true crime mysteries and unsolved murders and just wild, insane cases out of all over the country, but a lot of them from the Boston area that we covered as journalists. So I think people are fascinated by true crime. Most people, they go to work, they have their family, they don't understand this world. And us as journalists, Tamsen, as you know, we get a peek behind that curtain, and oftentimes we're fully behind that curtain for months at a time. And we get in very uncomfortable
Yeah.
situations, and we learn about things that most people maybe don't even want to learn about. But it's all about sharing
Yeah.
stories, of humans. That's what I love to do.
And I feel like lessons from them. There are so many that you don't even realize the
Yeah.
lessons you're learning as a journalist and as somebody who's listening to those stories as time goes on. What do you want to do next? I mean, you're really. I love the fact that you're living what you really wanted to do. You
Mm.
know, in the very beginning, and you know, you were a journalist, and that really built you. If you could have looked at yourself, you know, however many years ago, 30 years ago, and said this
Mm.
is a trajectory, you could have never even built it as perfectly as it is. What do you think that takes? I mean, I think it takes persistence, it takes perseverance, but it takes something else in there. It takes unlocking like that you know, moving past fear. There's just no room for that.
Yeah, and I think persistence is one. You know, I like to say that, you know, no one's going to invite you to the party. You have to kick in the door, you know, and I think that's true a lot of times that,
Right.
um, you know, it's easy to say no, it's easy to accept no, but if you know that you have something great or a talent to deliver, pursue it and find another option, especially today. There's so many different mediums to, you know, what we're doing right now. You know, this is something you and I probably wouldn't have thought we'd be doing right now. You know, I thought I'd be working for the Boston Herald till the day I died, you know, but it just, things change and the world changes and you change with it. Pursue what you love. And so for me personally, I mean, I want to continue to write more books. I have a new book coming out in February, a true crime book. It's called Riding with Evil, and it's about the only police officer to ever infiltrate the pagan motorcycle gang, which is the rivals of the Hells Angels. So it's a great true
Wow.
crime story, but it's also, again, it's one of those stories where he had a wife and three little girls at home, and he went and lived with these bikers undercover for 2 years and barely was home with his family. So it's that whole double life kind of sacrifice story. And the podcast, and you know, we want to make more movies. We're working on turning other books of ours and other people's books into movies. We recently completed a screenplay about the world's first extreme skier, this guy named Doug Coombs, actually from Massachusetts, and we're in development with that with Outside Studios, which is part of Outside Magazine. So we got a lot of projects. So the short answer to your question is, I want to make more books and more movies and more TV shows and more podcasts.
I want you to be the poster child for people who are turning 50 as starting a whole new chapter and not being afraid of doing it at all. I just
You
love
know,
it.
it's funny.
It's
It's
really
like I
fascinating.
well, thank you, and you the same. I mean, you know, it's 50, like you said. It's not our parents' 50. You know, when I look at pictures of my family when I was a little kid, my dad's like 38, and he looks like an old man. I'm like, you know, I don't feel old. You know, I feel like I want to work every day and do stuff, and I'm having a lot of fun in my career. And I don't think that anyone our age should really, um, you know, succumb to that stereotype where like, oh, I'm 50, I need to think about retiring. It's like, no, do what you love. Like now is a time for me to go for everything that I ever wanted in my life, and that's what I'm going to do.